Hey, everybody. We've got your microphones off and your cameras as well. Bryce and I are here. We're going to get going in just a couple minutes. So just wanted to let you know that. Thank you all so much for being here, and we'll get going in a little bit. Thank you. Well, all right, Bryce. So let's get this thing rolling. Just want to say hi to everybody again, and we'll get rolling into our investing during the election year. So, Bryce, how you doing tonight?
I'm well. How about yourself, Mike?
I'm doing good, enjoying Arizona. I know we've got a few people down here from Arizona, and got a handful from up in South Dakota as well. So, welcome everybody. Just wanted to introduce myself to start off. My name is Mike Peterson. I am down here in the Phoenix area and run the Arizona office of Impact Wealth Management, and have been known Rochelle for a couple decades, and really enjoy being a part of the team. So, Bryce, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Bryce Anderson. I'm in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So I'm with Rochelle and Heather up here in the beautiful state of South Dakota, and we are. So I've been an advisor for 20 years. I've had multiple roles in both management and advising, and love to do these kind of things just because I love the impact, pun intended, that they can have on our decision making. So the more you know, the better you can understand the decisions you make. So I thank everyone for being here tonight, and I think it's a terrific opportunity to learn more and kind of understand how we frame things.
Yes, that's perfect. And I want to bring up this slide real quick. It's one of those disclosures formality that we have to put up there. So we're going to leave it on for just a moment so you can see that we actually put the disclosure out there. So we're just going to let that sit for a second, and then we'll get moving into what we're going to talk about tonight. So again, I'm excited for this night. It's been a while. We've been planning for this one for a few months. It's one of our first webinars. We've had a couple others, but really a great topic for me. I really enjoy this one. So, all right. I'm going to move into the next slide. Because one of the things that you and I had talked about, Bryce, was really when it comes to investing around the elections, there's really a difference between fear and danger. I think a lot of times what we feel is fear because we're worried about the outcome, but really it's the danger that we need to be worried about, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I pulled this up and just a definition and just kind of the difference between the two, and I like it. Fear is anticipation over something that may or may not happen, and oftentimes we let that fear really grip us. And you're going to hear us talk about this throughout the day, tonight. I mean, as we talk more about this, but danger is the real outcome. That's the something that will cause harm or injury, and really understanding the distinction between those two is game changing. That's what we have to pay attention to. So one of the articles I pulled as we get into this was from the Henry Ford Health Institute, and I'm gonna put this slide back up here because I thought it was interesting. It says election anxiety is real, and here's how we cope. This one has surprised me. 73% of people this year in this election said it's causing them anxiety. But why does this election feel different than those throughout modern history? Well, there's a few things that they mention, and I'm going to just walk through those real quickly. A lot of it is around social media, but what can we do about it, right? So be mindful about how you use social media. Doom scrolling is an easy trap to fall into. You can stay informed without being on your phone 24/7. And I really see this with the younger generation. My kids, I've got a 24-year-old and a 22-year-old, and this is an area where they're always on their phones. And so that's one of the things that really plays into that fear. Number two, they said to really help out in this anxiety issue is to cultivate your personal life. Whether it's playing a sport, cooking a meal, reading a novel, or playing a musical instrument, filling your free time with enjoyable activities can prevent you from getting too entrenched in the anxiety-inducing election. Number three is get involved in your community, because anxiety stems from a fear of the unknown and a lack of control. So making a difference in your community can help you regain some control, and it benefits your neighborhood in the process. I like that one. Number four is have respectful discussions with people on the other side of the fence. I think we all know how much that affects people. Opposing beliefs can be mutually beneficial. So if you're in those situations, just tell yourself, I'm going to be listening today. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. But remember, if you do get to a point in the conversation where you're getting angry or anxious, it is okay to step away. So I really like those. And then, but the last thing they added was just to remember that the engagement in the election process is a positive. So for having people, kind of worried or interested in the election is an important thing. The bad part would be as if we weren't interested in the election. And so I like that point as well. So Bryce, I'm going to actually turn things over to you. You've got a pretty cool story kind of regarding that fear and danger, and we're going to kind of leave everyone on a little bit of a cliffhanger as we head into the next portion. But I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that election story.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and I'd just like to make a quick point about fear and danger and why the rise of social media really has exacerbated this to levels that we haven't necessarily appreciated in the past, even though I'm going to share a story about how we have shared anxiety in the past. So they figured out, modern neuroscience has figured out that, anxiety is all worry and no danger, right? That's like crippling anxiety. You can't leave your house because you think you're going to get bit by a snake. There's not a snake within 200 miles of you. All danger and no anxiety and no fear is the legendary overconfidence of adolescence, right? I mean, and so people who don't understand the risk. So we've got to balance that out. So a lot of this stems from a survival mechanism that has been created over time in our brains. So in your primitive brain, you are anxious, and that's what helps you survive. Because if you think about it for a second, if you're a human and you're walking, like you've got like an ancient human, and you've got to walk through a field to get to a lake so you can get a drink of water. And you walk through this field and there's a rustling over there in the grass. Are you going to stick your head in and investigate it? And it might be a lion? Or is your brain going to go, don't do that because it could be a lion? And if it is a lion, we're dead. So you assume it's aligned and then you run away. It could have been anything, but that's kind of that idea that anxiety has actually created a survival mechanism in us. So the people who create social media, they understand all that. And they've used that against us to be able to manipulate our emotions, and everything is fear driven. The other thing about how social media works is a lot of it's based on clicks. So it's not based on content, it's based on clicks. The more clicks you get, the more you get paid, the more notoriety, the more your channel gets promoted. So it doesn't really matter if your content is true or insightful or useful. It just matters if it gets clicked. Well, what gets clicked? What you're worried about, right? So they create fear in order to get clicks. They're using neuroscience against us. It's kind of interesting how we've gotten very good at pushing our own buttons. But I want to share this quick story with you, right? So I want you to think. I want to imagine a time in American politics that was even weirder and more dangerous than today, if you can believe it. So imagine this for a minute. Imagine that Donald Trump is still president, and then Joe Biden is his vice president, and they are going to run for re-election against each other in November. Both campaign that they're the only ones who can and will save democracy, but who will win? And one candidate is a dictator who will take democracy away from you, and the other is an anarchist who will let democracy dissolve into nothing. The nation is falling apart before our very eyes, and we are falling prey to foreign powers. Free speech has been suppressed by the government and big business. Immigration and illegal aliens swarm all over our borders. Sex scandals ooze out of control. And our country has never been more divided, with two political parties tearing this country apart. And surely, and a lot of people think this, we are on the verge of civil war. And if you vote for the wrong person, the nation as you know it will be over. Even if you vote for the right person, it doesn't seem likely that this American experiment can or will last much longer. So, do any of these issues sound familiar? Right? Okay. And so you cast your vote. The race is so tight it ends in a tie. There is no clear winner. Cries of voter fraud and suppression fill the air. Tension mounts as we hold another election. But who wins that one? Then it gets even weirder and more dangerous, if you can believe that. And until a miracle happens that we're blessed with to this day. So stay tuned to the end for the rest of the story.
Awesome. I love it. All right. Well, the next section that we're going to lead into is really a conversation that I had with Rochelle. And I'll let the video speak for itself. She was going to be here tonight, but you're going to learn exactly why she is not. So give me just a moment and we'll move into this. Bryce, is it playing? All right. Well, I just want to say thank you for being here today with me doing this webinar. You and I have been talking about this for a few months. We decided that we'd do something around the elections and investing around that time. You know, I really wanted to do a webinar, and you jumped on board and you said, sure, let's figure that out. And so we've had it on board or on the schedule, I should say, for a couple of months. And you've got some big news though, that kind of fun. You were nominated for something called an MB, and the organization that handles that had no idea our webinar was on the 10th. And so they of course overscheduled us. And so it's pretty cool though that you and I get to do a recording here. We're going to get this information out to the folks that are on here. So tell me a little bit about what an MB is.
Yeah. So first of all, it's a little bit strange to not be there live. I wasn't like completely expecting a nomination, so it's a nice surprise. But yeah, MB, an MB award is by MB, which is kind of like the, it was the YWCA years ago. Now it's changed into MB. And so their mission is empowering women and providing opportunities within the community to learn, grow, and reinforce the leadership and well-being of women. And so every year they do this tribute to women event, and there is an opportunity to nominate women, different categories, banking and like social work and those kinds of things. And so yeah, I was one of six nominees for an MB in the category of finance. So that's exciting.
Awesome. Well, we'll miss you, but of course, we'll be tracking what's going on and hear from you as soon as it's over. So,
Yep.
again, thanks for being here today and doing this with me. I'm excited for it. So,
Yeah, me too.
there's a couple things that I wanted to do today. I know I really want to tap into what you know as you've been an advisor for through several presidential election cycles. And so, I think as we were talking, you said 2008, 12, 16, 20, and now this year.
Correct.
So,
Mhm.
so I want to get some of that information in a little bit, but I figured I'd kick it off with just some of the historical data that surrounds really most of what we see is from like the 1950s right in there. And so there's some pretty interesting things. And I want to start off with this one first. Now I have to share my screen, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I wanted to start off with this slide. This one was an interesting one that I thought really to talk about some of the more recent presidents that we've had. And so you can see here our sitting president right now, Biden. And of course, the president before him was Trump. And I like this slide because it talked about the different asset classes. And so you can see in here, there's really not a lot that's similar between the two. And I mean, if you look on the left side at the bottom, Trump, on the Trump one, the commodities actually was down quite a bit for his presidency, but Biden's was up, right? And then we see emerging markets is really low on Biden's and Trump's was up. So there's really not a lot in common other than I did notice two things in here. US growth and the S&P 500 were both in the top three, right? So I think what this one showed for me, and I'll let you comment a little bit, is that really diversification is the key here. And with the S&P 500 being very diversified, that's what really is what stands out to me in these slides, that really it's not about who is in the office. It's more about making sure that you're diversified. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a couple of things to point out too on this slide. On the Biden administration, this particular slide, the data only ran through March 31st of 2024.
True.
And so even since that time, the markets have had really strong run here the last 6 months. So those numbers aren't completely up to the minute. And the S&P 500 would look obviously even a little bit better than that because we've had such a strong run. But yeah, I mean, under different presidencies, different sectors of the market are probably always going to look, different, because certainly policies influence, specific sectors of the market more than the broad market. But yeah, I mean, like, diversification is, I think what we see when we look throughout history, whether it's we're comparing presidential elections or we're just comparing specific time periods in the market, going all the way back to, before the Great Depression, diversification is absolutely key.
Yeah. All right. Well, I thought that was a fun one, and I wanted to move on to this one because this has a little more context to it. It's over several presidencies. And for me, when I looked at this one, my takeaway was, look how much positive growth there is in the market. I was pretty surprised that it's very positive. And there's only a few presidencies in there that actually went below the line and had some issues. And I think if we looked at even the time frame on those, there's probably some significant historical issues that happened in there. I know for sure when we look at the Bush era, the minus 36.7% there. I know 9/11, right, was 9/11, 2001. And so we really saw the market take a dip then. And then if we go even further back then to back in, I think it was the Nixon one that's at minus 19% coming out of Vietnam and really getting stability back. So there's some things there that I thought were interesting, but it really, again, just shows that it doesn't matter really who's sitting in the presidency, but there's growth. Growth happens because you're in the market. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, similar. It really more depends on where we're at in an economic cycle. Like you said, the negative 36%. Yeah, we got the tech bust, 9/11.
Oh yeah,
and we also had then the Great Recession of 2008. Did Bush cause that? I mean, certainly like some policies, you could argue that some policies contributed to the housing crash and whatnot. But at the same time, not like really the president just happened to be seated when those things, took place. So whether it was a Republican or a Democrat, I think we would have seen a similar outcome.
I like that one. That one was really fun. I just liked all of the positive the returns that I see on that one. And before we get to insights on the current election, I have one more that I just want to go over here quick. All right. This is one that I thought was really interesting because kind of the way I looked at it was that if you look at this one and we see obviously you've got the Democrats on one side, the Republicans on the other, but those divided pillars in there are the biggest, right? So it's almost like the market likes disagreement. Right? If everything's on one side, when we look at if it was a Democrat Congress on the far left side under a Democratic president, that was like the lowest performing. It was same on the Republican side. If it's a Republican House or Congress, and a Republican sitting president, it's lower than when it was divided. And so it was interesting, almost like there's something to be said about having to actually work with each other. And the market likes that. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, for sure. I think the stock market specifically likes things that are predictable. And when you have a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress, or when you have a Republican president and a Republican Congress, things can move much more quickly. And that causes the markets to be concerned that things are going to happen fast that they're not expecting. And when you have a divided House and Senate, then things are just going to move more slowly, and the stock market feels much more comfortable that it knows what to expect. And so I think that's part of the reason why the stock market really likes that divided Congress. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very interesting just to see that. And that one really stood out to me. So that's a little bit about some of the historical context that we've seen among all of the presidencies. Yeah. And of course, we've got an interesting one this year, election, I should say, because we had actually the incumbent president step away from the election to have his current vice president step into the role as the Democratic nominee for the president. And then we have a past president who was voted out and now is running again and is back in to get a second term. So it's really a different one in this year's election. And I just wanted to ask you on some of the insights that you have coming into this one, and let's let you talk for a little bit about that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Do you want me to
stop sharing the screen?
Yeah.
Stop sharing. Yeah, so I think with this election in particular, there are definitely, like you pointed out, some kind of interesting components. One of the things that I always caution people about in general, whether it's about an election or about any kind of period in history, even through the pandemic, through the crisis of 2008, be really careful about saying this time is different. One thing that I think history has proven to us is that really every time is different because we learn from our mistakes to a certain degree, and we do things differently. So history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Like we've all heard that saying. And so the thing that I think that is consistently true is that smart people always figure out a way to make money. Companies, regardless of what's happening, companies figure out how to navigate many different environments. Even COVID is a good example of that. Everything shut down and we moved online, right? We figured out how to do business much more digitally. I think there's statistics that show that we moved ahead from a technology standpoint. We all just learned technology at a much higher pace than what we had been learning technology in the past. Yeah. We all adapted. Companies figured out how to move their businesses online and how to adapt to those changing environments. So regardless of what's happening in the economy, whether it's the election or, a pandemic, this time is different, but smart people always figure out a way to make money. So that's kind of one of my big, just in general takeaways to, just help kind of calm people down about, what we might be walking into. It's going to be interesting, this particular election, because, I think victory is going to be very narrowly defined. throughout the country, we have certain states that pretty much always vote red and certain states that always vote blue. There are really only about 10 inconsistent states that we would consider purple states that go either way. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio tends to lean red, but North Carolina, Michigan, Indiana, Iowa, Georgia, Florida, which also tends to lean red, and Arizona. So those are like the 10 states that we would consider purple that could really end up going either way. And I think that right now the candidates are really specifically focused, of course, on those purple states, try to swing them their direction. But even deeper than that, it's really interesting because the independent voter is becoming more and more popular. In 2008, only about 26% of the electorate in 2008 was registered independent. Today, in 2024, it's about 40%.
Wow.
That's registered independent. So where, in the past, I think we've seen less attention paid to the independent voter. The independent voter felt like their voice didn't matter. They were throwing away their vote. But these candidates are very specifically focused on the independent voter, and specifically the independent voter in these inconsistent states.
Sure.
So in order to target that independent voter, they have to know who is the independent voter. And a couple kind of interesting statistics is 62% of independent voters are millennial or Gen Z.
Oh,
So it's a younger voting class. Yep. And so I think that's why we're hearing like a lot right now about the taxation of tips, because who are our wait staff, primarily that younger generation. That's going to be a high demographic. It's even just talk about the child tax credit, help with down payment on new homes. Those kinds of things are specifically targeted to that independent voter, to try to capture those votes. So I think there's a lot of actually interesting information if you dig down into who is the independent voter, that kind of explains some of the things that we're seeing on the campaign trails right now, I think. But so right now, like I said, we've got a couple of those 10 states that lean one way or another. So the real boss-up states that are really anybody's guess right now is Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Nevada. Those are states that are probably really considered the toss-up states. And when I started out talking, I said that victory is probably going to be pretty narrowly defined.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that is interesting is that Republicans are more likely to show up at the polls. That could also be in part the demographic, of the Republican voter versus the Democratic voter, and where they are geographically and where they are in age. A younger voter is a little bit more perhaps inclined to mail in a ballot. Those kinds of. So anyway, a lot of the mail-in ballots, it could take a little while for us to get count on those, and a lot of the independent voters will potentially be mailing in ballots. So it's possible that we won't even know who the president is, night of, if we stay up late trying to watch election results, you might be staying up really late. you might be better off to shut off the TV and check in the morning.
Yes. Yeah. That's interesting because when I first moved to Arizona, we actually had mail-in ballots and we loved it. And so as long you're right, it was one of those interesting things that if the state has that option and it's a safe way to do it, it's really convenient. So
Yep,
it
is. And I think, like I said, I think that the specifically like from the baby boomer generation on up, maybe a little bit less comfortable with that kind of with that they much rather be present at the poll, checking the box as opposed to mailing in. So like I said, demographic matters a little bit in that.
I think so too. Yeah.
So these other interesting thing, we talked about how the market kind of prefers a divided Congress. There's 23 seats up for grabs that are currently occupied by Democrats in the Senate,
Okay.
11 seats up for grabs that are currently occupied by Republicans. It is probably going to be that whoever wins the White House will win the House.
Oh,
And the Senate will probably flip Republican.
Okay.
Just kind of statistically looking at all of the Democratic seats that are up for grabs, and
Right.
like looking at history and so forth. So it'll be interesting because if a Republican wins the White House, they'll likely win the House, and the Senate will likely flip Republican. So we could see a Republican sweep.
Sure.
If a Democrat wins the White House, we'll likely see the House turn Democrat as well, and the Senate will likely flip Republican. So
Right.
be just interesting to see.
Yeah.
And that's mostly because again of those purple states. So if they lean left with the presidential vote, they'll likely lean left with those House votes as well.
Right.
So just the way that all shakes out. Yeah. So who knows? Like I said, we probably won't know or might not know election results because it will be such a narrow margin.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
But a couple of things, we talked about, it doesn't really matter who's in the White House as far as the stock market goes, and different parties tend to favor a little bit different segments of the market.
Right.
Oil companies, and are we going to be giving incentives for companies to go green, or all of those kinds of things
Yeah.
to segments of the market. But speaking on broader terms, if Trump is reelected, he's likely going to want to, well, not just likely, he's going to want to extend the 2017 tax cuts.
Right. Yeah.
The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that he put in place. So he's proposing actually even lower corporate taxes down to 15%. So more corporate tax cuts, and the extension of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Harris doesn't want to raise taxes on anyone making more than about $400,000, or anyone making less than about $400,000.
Yep.
But she wants to increase corporate taxes to 28%. So we see some higher tax burdens on the high income earners and corporations. So that might not have as big of an impact on the budget, because she wants to raise taxes on those, higher income earners and corporations.
Right.
But that her proposals will take Congress agreement, right? So those kinds of things will have to pass Congress. So it's unlikely that it will pass exactly as she proposes it.
Right.
The thing about Trump is that he's proposing to pay for some of his tax cuts with tariffs, and tariffs actually don't require Congress approval. They can be done with some executive orders. So it's actually like maybe more possible that he would be able to get some of those things done the way that he wants to, because he can do them with executive orders. So that'll be interesting. But one thing that's so interesting to me, Mike, is that no one is really talking about the deficit, and no one is really talking about Social Security. These are really
That's
big
what I was just thinking. Yeah, that Social Security thing has been looming for a while, and someone's going to have to tackle it at some point. And it's
exactly. Yeah. And here, this I think speaks really a lot to what we were talking about. It just kind of depends on who happens to be president during a specific economic cycle. The problems with the deficit did not start with the last presidency. They didn't start with the presidency before that. I mean, the problems with the deficit go way, way, way back. We haven't had balanced budgets since the Clinton era. Bill Clinton, I believe, was the last president who had balanced budgets. So the problems with the deficit are, everybody's contributed, right? Every presidency since the Clinton administration. And then if we just take that chunk out, it's been every presidency all the way back to, the Great Depression and beyond. They contributed to the deficit. The Social Security problems did not start with the, with the last president or the president before that. They've been a long time in the making.
Yeah.
And, our current candidates want to kind of, I think, ignore those two big elephants in the room, and they're going to kick the can down the road. Eventually, the Social Security Trust Fund is right now projected to run out of money by about 2034,
Mhm.
depends on what study
Yep.
you look at. So my guess is that it's not going to get dealt with until the very last minute, and it's going to be whoever happens to be in office at that time
Right.
is going to have to put together the proposals to fix Social Security, which,
Yeah.
side note, I really think they'll fix Social Security. I don't think they're going to let Social Security go broke.
I agree.
But anyway, those are just issues that like the candidates of this particular election are just not taking on. But it is something that I think we need to just as voters and as citizens and as investors, we need to be aware of that. And I think we need to be, calling for more fiscal responsibility in the White House with the deficit and Social Security. So
I agree.
yeah. One thing I did want to just quickly touch on before I hush, is that something that's been talked about a lot is the whole Kamala has suggested taxing unrealized gains. I've seen like even some memes floating around on Facebook about how like imagine like your grandma has got a house that she bought way back when, and then now it's worth $400,000 and she's going to get taxed on it. She's going to have to take out a loan and she'll go broke.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that. Yeah.
Yep. So a couple things on that. First of all, the taxation of unrealized gains, Kamala is proposing would only apply to people with $100 million in assets or more. So should not affect a little grandma. That's not in the proposal. Number two, I think that this is incredibly messy on the details. So like if we tax unrealized gains, what will we do about unrealized losses? So if we get the gains tax in this year and next year we have a loss, is the government going to write us a check? Like no. The answer is right. You know the answer to that one. But I think it's incredibly messy. The details of it are too messy, and I don't see that actually getting much traction. I think that that's kind of just maybe something that sounds good in theory, to some of her voters, but in reality, I just don't think that that's probably going to be able to be operationalized.
Okay.
And I don't really see that getting much traction, after the fact. Then the last thing to say is that it is interesting because if you look back throughout history, the stock market is actually a pretty good predictor of who will win the election.
Oh.
83% of the time throughout history, if the stock market was positive in August, September, and October, then the incumbent wins. Now, like I said, a little bit of an interesting situation because we don't actually have an incumbent, or we have two incumbents, or however you want to look at it.
Right. Yeah.
But so right now, just as we're recording this, Mike, all signs are looking positive, with the exception of we've got a lot of conflict in the Middle East right now.
Right. Yeah.
And that's causing some concern in the stock market. We had a really bumpy start to October. If the stock market experienced a 10% pullback this month, which is entirely possible. We've had a really good run in the market so far this year. And saw a 10% pullback. It could actually tip the scales, according to the stock market in history. It could tip the scales towards a Trump re-election. But like I said, it's 83%. Been accurate 83% of the time. There's no silver bullet on the accuracy of that. But but bottom line, I think the biggest things to keep in mind for investors, like specifically our clients and those people that are watching right now.
Yep.
There is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will probably be one of the biggest things that we'll be watching. Like, will that be extended? Will it be allowed to sunset in 2025? Something we've been talking with our clients about all along, that like we can take advantage of these lower tax rates as much as possible. If there's room in the 12% tax bracket, looking at ways to convert some money out of the IRA to the Roth and all those kinds of things. There's opportunities out there that exist. We don't know what will happen with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but we do know where taxes are right now. And we also know that they're probably not going to be going any lower, for, well, perhaps ever.
Maybe ever.
Yeah.
We want to say
So taking advantage of these really low rates as much as we can, and just watching and navigating in the future. there has been some talk, if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act actually is allowed to expire, and the federal estate tax exclusion will come down. Right now, it's high enough that it really doesn't affect very many people. We don't have very much in the way of, very many clients that are impacted by the federal estate tax exclusion as it stands today. But if it's allowed to expire and that federal estate tax exclusion comes down, specifically our, farming community, business owners, that could become a, topic of consideration for people.
Absolutely.
Like those Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is going to be allowed to expire. So anyway, just things to consider. In the bottom line is, everything in government moves slowly. I think we have this general feeling like, oh my gosh, like, even though we know better, we somehow think that the promises that are made on the elections trail, or the campaign trail, that if the opposing party gets in, oh my gosh, they're going to do everything they promised they were going to do, and that could be a disaster. In reality, like, unless they win the House and the Senate, very unlikely that those things would pass quickly. And even with a win in the House and the Senate, even if we saw a sweep, there are a range of, moderate to conservative on each side of the aisle, right? And so we've got, conservative Democrats, and we've got more liberal Republicans. And so the odds that everybody's going to just be in line and just start passing things left and right. Just probably not going to happen. That hasn't been our experience. So just keep that in mind. Things move slowly in government. Our government's designed that way. And
true. That's true.
The other thing, I keep saying the last thing. This is one of the things that always sticks out in my mind is when the Affordable Care Act was passed back in 2016 or whenever that was, Obamacare. There was a lot of my clients were very concerned about that, very opposed to that, and saying if it passes, like, we'll never get this reversed, right? Like, this could be a disaster. It could cost us so much money and so forth. Well, here we are, something like 8 years later. The Affordable Care Act has been largely gutted. There are very few things that remain from it. One of the things that remains is the fact that insurance companies can't deny you based on pre-existing conditions. I think everybody likes that. Everybody likes that rule, right? And so even big changes that happen oftentimes get reversed, or what's good about them stays, and some of the things that people don't agree with end up getting discarded. So even when it looks like big changes are happening, a change in government, and we reverse some of the things that the opposing party didn't like. So just keep that in mind, that things, even changes in government, aren't always permanent. Even if we don't like them, they're not always permanent. We learn and we move on and we make adjustments, and that's the beauty of the democracy, right? Absolutely.
And that's a great point to wrap it up, that as there's so many big things out there that we see and we get scared of, or it doesn't align with our values and our morals, and so we let that fear kick in, and that's really not what the danger is, right? The danger is not listening or not planning, sitting down with your advisor and learning about what's going on and making rash decisions. That's really the danger, right? So again, for all of our clients that are on here and that we meet with regularly and talk through these things, these are things that you probably have heard us talk about time and time again, making sure that we stay in the market and we don't make rash decisions. So that's really all I wanted to add in there, is to kind of wrap it up. I don't know if you have anything else, but
nope, I don't. I said last thing for the last time.
Awesome. Well, Rochelle, thank you so much, and good luck on MB. We're excited. We will all find out. I know that for sure. And if there's any way for us during this webinar on Thursday to get it live, we're going to try, but we'll see.
Sounds good. I'll keep you updated. I will say this though, regardless of the outcome of the award, I really feel like the honor is in the nomination. I did happen to find out who nominated me. But you don't always know, and it is a super cool thing to have someone that out there that said like, hey, we like what you're doing and we think that this deserves some recognition. So I appreciate the nomination, whether I get the win or not. I appreciate the nomination and I appreciate your support, and be willing to work with me, Mike, on my
Yes.
absence and pre-recording this. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Yes. Well, thank you, and we'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. Well, some good information in there, huh, Bryce? Lots of information, and we did find out. I was talking with Rochelle. She gets to enjoy the nomination, so that's as far as the MB goes. She was very upfront, and was just so honored again to get the nomination. And she said, "We're going to shoot for next year." So. You'll all get to talk with Rochelle about that. I wanted to share one last slide on my side of things. I wanted to, as we got to the end of that video, I was thinking about the moving to cash, and I hear it so often, and I'm sure you have too, Bryce, over the years of, taking money out of the market when you have those and you make a rash decision, right? This slide really interested me because it talked about the S&P 500 growth, and if you moved to cash during the election year, so basically every 4 years, if you moved to cash, what that would do to your portfolio. You can see there the blue line. Now I'm colorblind, so I think it's blue. It might be purple, but that blue line there shows 979 thousands of dollars. You would have lost almost a little over $2 million by being in cash in those 4 years. What do you think about that, Bryce?
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It really is, isn't it? And just to think that it would make sense and it would feel good.
Yeah.
You would say, like, you'd have every rational reason to do it. It would be emotionally satisfying. You say, I'm just going to sit out for a minute. It won't hurt anything. It's just going to be a couple days. It's a little bit. I'm not afraid of the long term. I just want to see what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
What a profound opportunity cost. Think about what $2 million does to the quality of your life and the financial security for you and your family and the options it provides for your life.
Right.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah.
To think that the fear is that the world is going to change in ways that create uncertainty. And the danger is missing out on those returns, because missing out on returns is really hazardous to your long-term wealth. The world's going to change anyway. You might as well just be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Have a disciplined investment process, have diversification. I just think that the opportunity cost when they don't know it for short-term gratification, the long-term cost is just enormous.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to put this slide up because, of course, we've got the cliffhanger and want you to finish up your story on this crazy presidential story that you've got. And tell me the end result here.
I will. So can I just make one point about that chart that you showed with Biden and Trump?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Can you put that up real quick?
Yeah. Give me just a second.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, no, I apologize. That one was in the recorded video. I don't have that one readily available.
Okay.
Yeah,
no
that one was recorded in the video. So sorry about that.
Oh, don't worry about it. So I just wanted to make a quick point about, to your last point about being out of the market and transitioning up, trying to time the market based on the presidential cycle and what that happens to cost you and the opportunity cost on your money. I actually went through and I looked at that chart and I broke it down and I said, if you equally weighted each one of those asset classes and you just owned all 11 of them in equal proportion, what would your return have been through Trump? And it would have been 11.5. What would it have been through Biden? It would have been 4.5. And you think, well, maybe Trump's better than Biden, or maybe Biden's better than Trump. Biden had exogenous shocks, right? He had COVID. He had an Armageddon in the bond market when they started raising interest rates. It blew up the bond market. Mm-hmm. They had all these challenges, but the point is the markets and diversification works in good time and it works in bad times.
Yep.
And who on earth could have predicted which one would have been the one asset class you should have owned.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, nobody can guess that. Nobody could be successful at it. And nobody
Correct.
has been in the past, and I don't think they're going to be in the future either. So
Yeah.
staying disciplined and staying diversified, those are the two things you want to work on. And of course, we always help people be tax efficient as well. So
Yeah.
um,
Good point.
so back to the story. Okay, now reimagine with me that remember, Trump is the president, Biden's the vice president, and they're up for re-election in November. Okay, they are setting themselves up for the nastiest election in U.S. history, generally historically agreed to, that the election of 1800 between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson was the nastiest election in U.S. history. How could that be? So think about it for a second. They've got because the president and the vice president weren't on political parties at the time. They were elected by the Electoral College based on votes. The guy who got the most votes was the president. The guy who got the second most votes was the vice president. So that's why they could end up this way. So Washington served for 8 years. He was done. And when he turned it over, John Adams got it in 1796. Well, I mean, can you imagine trying to step into the shoes of Washington, right? Huge monumental ask. And John Adams was a really great political theorist, but a really bad politician. He just didn't have the personality for it, right? Super bright guy, just didn't want to spend 6 hours in the canoe with him. You know, he just wasn't a real great hang. And so Thomas Jefferson was his vice president. They disagreed about everything, right? They didn't like each other when they were president and vice president. And this is actually how political parties got formed in America. This is the formation of what we have today with political parties. So in the election of 1800, all of those things came true. It was tied. There were sex scandals, and there were no rules about what you could or couldn't say. There were no political slander. And no one had ever really done this before. So it got violent and nasty. Like there were ad campaigns, and politicians today say some crazy stuff, but no one is threatening to say that if you elect that other guy, he's going to put your children on a stick, right? They're going to, rape the women and children. They're going to impale your children. They're going to take over the country in the threats of dictatorship and anarchy. All of those things were true then. They're still using it today. A lot of what you see today is the exact same stuff that happened, right? So it was so incredibly vile and nasty. It just got really bad. I won't bore you with all the details, but well, some of this stuff, we'll assume this is a family show, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And Washington, in his farewell address, said, "Hey, beware of political parties. You guys don't want political parties." And Adams and Jefferson turned to him and immediately said, "Yeah, I think we do." They ignored his advice, and that's what caused political parties ever since. So in this election, right, incredibly brutal, incredibly nasty, and Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were friends. They signed the Declaration of Independence together. They helped create the idea of America. They served as diplomats, foreign diplomats to England and France. They were friends. They had sweat through the revolution. They formed the government, and now they were tearing it apart. So in the tiebreaker, right, between the first time around, it's tied between Adams and Jefferson. So they have to go back to a re-election. This is where it gets even weirder and even more dangerous, because the first time people have super high anxiety, and there was a tremendous amount of danger at the time too, because the Republic wasn't as entirely figured out as we have it today. America was weak, it was small, it was not unified. People didn't think of themselves as Americans. They thought of themselves as Virginians or New Yorkers or South Dakotans or whatever, Arizonans. Wherever you're at, that's what you thought of yourself. And then if you even thought of yourself as an Arizonan, you thought of yourself as from Phoenix instead of Sedona. There was no idea of real unity, right? And so they're tearing this country apart, and they have this election that gets tied. Huge amount of turmoil, right? Everyone's like, "Oh, we're going to riot. There's a civil war is going to break out." So then they go and they do another election, and the Electoral College is the one who votes on this at that time. And Adams loses. But remember when I said earlier that it came down to between the two finishing votes, that who got to be president and vice president. So Thomas Jefferson and a guy named Aaron Burr, they tied. So they went around 3 times in the electoral college trying to get like one guy to change his mind. Finally, one guy did. Burr got to be the vice president. Thomas Jefferson got to be the president. And that's what actually caused the tiebreaker. And that's how Jefferson was elected. But Adams, and you know, it's kind of interesting from a political standpoint. You think of these guys, right? Like Adams is a titan of American politics. Thomas Jefferson's on Mount Rushmore. I mean, you don't think of these guys as being petty and squabble and quarrelsome, and they were friends, right? In fact, it's kind of interesting. Like John Adams' last act as president, his last night in the White House, he basically sat there all night long and wrote out these appointments for minor political positions just so he could get his supporters into positions. And then Jefferson would either have to go back and cancel those or unblock them, but he was appointing people right at the last minute. That's how he spent his last night at the White House.
Yeah.
Just to throw a monkey wrench in the Jefferson administration.
Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine that for a moment, you know, that these guys are friends, they're buddies, and they are in the process of tearing the country apart. And the other interesting thing about this is, so a little side story, but imagine if this was now Biden wins and then Kamala Harris was the vice president. And so if you think that like American politics is weird today and we're all divided and it's, you know, we probably have a lot more in common than they did back then. It was kind of the Wild West, even though you think of these marble men like Jefferson and Adams and Thomas Jefferson, and you think they're these like glorified people, and they are, but they were human too. You know, politics is the study of human nature. Investing is the study of economics and opportunity. So in human nature, you know, and just think of the political chaos of this. So imagine if Kamala Harris got mad at Janet Yellen and they went out and had pistols at dawn.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris shot Janet Yellen in the chest and then ran away to California to start a second United States.
Yeah.
Aaron Burr did exactly that.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
And so having said all that, you know, you think, right, we don't have battles at dawn. We don't have, I mean, yes, politics has always been dirty and contentious, but through the end, they accomplished the one blessing that we have today, that it was the most remarkable thing they'd ever done. So as nasty as 1800, the election of 1800 was, it was also the first time in world history that there was a peaceful transition from one political party to the opposite political party. Yeah. So what did they do? The two guys who helped create America proved that America works. Yeah. They've been transferring power back and forth. And that tension between the left and the right and the left and the right, it's kind of like driving a car, right? You don't just drive straight, you sort of swerve between the lines. You go a little left, you go a little right, and eventually you go straight. But the system works. America's great. Whatever happens, we know that the process works. We're going to keep moving on. And if we can understand the value of the decisions that we make from whatever happens in terms of politics, whatever happens in terms of the market, whatever you need with your personal economy, you know, we'll always be there to help you make that decision. But this is just noise. And it's, yes, democracy is noisy and it's messy, but it works.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for the story. It was really fun when we first were talking about it. So really interesting. Yeah.
So can I just make one last comment?
Real quick.
Michelle, I'll make it the last comment. So the end note of all of this. So Jefferson and Adams, actually, like I said, they were good friends. They were, you know, torn apart, became political rivals. And then later in life, they actually reconciled and they became friends again. And they spent the last 10 years of their lives like writing long letters to each other. They both died on the same day.
Oh, wow.
They died on July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine that just from a full historical political perspective that, you know, yes, there's fear and anxiety in the moment, but the resolution is generally good in the long term.
Yep. Love it. Thank you, Bryce. And I just want to say thanks to everybody. I wanted to put this slide up here because if you want to know more about us, if you have questions that came from this webinar, please go onto the website and just ask us. We'd love to talk a little bit more about that. And I think that's really it. You all have a great night. Bryce, thank you so much. And we'll see you all later.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, everybody. And yeah, look forward to chatting with anybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks. Have a wonderful evening.